This house is for my family now, my son, Adam, said. His tone was flat, like a man laying down rules for a lodger, not speaking to his father. If you want to stay, you'll have to help out. Do whatever's needed around here. I stared at the fresh paint on the living room wall. I'd chosen the color myself just last week. I didn't answer him. I just gripped the handle of the coffee mug I'd brought from my old place. I looked down at my hands, calloused from a lifetime of work, and then back at my son. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was already looking past me, at his wife, Talia. I turned and walked out to the porch. I set my mug down on the railing. I'd paid for that railing. I'd paid for the porch. I'd paid for the roof over his head. And I was now a guest. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. My name is Archer Prescott. I'm 78 years old, born and raised right here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I spent my whole life in construction, worked my way up from hauling bricks to foreman. I never got rich, but I lived with dignity and always paid my own way. When I retired, I kept my hand in, doing small jobs, fixing what others couldn't. That discipline let me build a nest egg. Something for a rainy day. That rainy day came for my son, Adam. He and his wife, Talia, were renting a cramped apartment over in Norristown. Things went south for them. The rent spiked. His boss held back pay, and suddenly they were facing eviction. I knew that feeling, the fear of having no roof, so I acted. I sold the small house I'd inherited from my parents, the only home I'd ever known. I took that money, added my entire nest egg, and bought this bigger house. 3 bedrooms, a decent yard, enough space for all of us. I thought I was securing a future for my family. I thought I was buying us all a little piece. Moving day, I was up before the sun. I had the coffee brewing when the truck with their things arrived. I helped Adam and Talia carry their few boxes and suitcases into the master bedroom. The place still smelled of primer and new carpets. I felt proud. I stood in the clean, empty yard and imagined us here. Quiet evenings, a family, secure. I went to the grocery store to stock the pantry. When I got back an hour later, a second truck was parked at the curb. It was a U-Haul, and people were unloading mattresses, bags, a microwave, even a large television. I recognized Talia's mother, Loretta, but she wasn't alone. With her were her husband, her 2 grown sons, one I knew as Travis, an aunt I'd never met, and a teenage nephew named Tyler. They weren't waiting by the truck. They were already walking in and out of my front door, carrying things inside as if they owned the place. Talia came out to the porch, beaming. "Archer, isn't this great? Mom and the family are going to stay with us for a few days while they get settled." It wasn't a request. It was an announcement. A few days turned into a permanent occupation. The next morning, I came down to the kitchen to make coffee and found Loretta already there, moving my pots and pans. "These old things are no good," she muttered, shoving my cast-iron skillet into a back cupboard. "We'll use mine." Talia's father took over my armchair in the living room. It became his spot, a pile of his magazines and blankets permanently camped on it. Travis and Tyler, her brothers, started using the yard as their personal workshop, leaving bikes in pieces on the grass and their tools on the porch steps. The requests began an hour later. They weren't requests. They were orders. "Archer, the trash is full. Take it out." "Archer, go get more milk. We're all out." There was no please. There was no thank you. I looked for Adam, But he was busy helping Travis mount their television on the living room wall. My wall. I waited until that evening. I found Adam in the kitchen alone, grabbing a beer. "Adam," I said, keeping my voice low, "we need to talk about this arrangement." He wouldn't look at me. He stared at the refrigerator door. "What arrangement, Dad?" "Your in-laws. They've taken over." He sighed, a long, heavy breath of annoyance. "They're family, Dad. They were in a tight spot." "So was I said. "This house was meant for us, for the three of us. I can't even get to my own coffee pot." He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were cold. It was the same look he'd had on the porch. "I told you, this house is for my family. Talia's family is my family now. If you want to stay here, you need to pull your weight. Stop complaining and help out." He left the room. I stood there for a full minute, listening to the sound of their television blaring in my living room. I didn't say a word. I picked up my jacket, went out to the porch, and sat in the dark. My space, bit by bit, was shrinking to the size of a single wooden chair. I started waking up earlier, 5 a.m., just to have an hour of silence before the house woke up. I was pouring my first cup of coffee in the pre-dawn quiet when I heard voices from the dining room. It was Talia and her mother, Loretta. They were speaking in low, satisfied whispers. "It's perfect, Mom. We'll be so much better off here," Talia said. "No landlord, no one to kick us out." "It is," Loretta agreed. Her voice was smug. "This house is just perfect for all of us. And really, Archer's old. He doesn't need this much space all to himself. It's better this way." They didn't know I was there. Or maybe they did, and they just didn't care. I didn't storm in. I didn't clear my throat. I stood perfectly still. Then, without making a sound, I walked back to my bedroom. My room was the smallest, the one at the back of the house by the laundry. I'd given Adam and Talia the master suite. I closed my door, locking the simple knob. I went to my nightstand and opened the bottom drawer. Beneath a stack of old work shirts, I pulled out a large manila envelope. I sat on the edge of my bed and took out the deed. The original, notarized document. I ran my thumb over my name. Archer Prescott, sole owner. This piece of paper was the only thing that proved I wasn't a ghost in my own home. It was the only thing that reminded me that no matter how much they wanted to erase me, I was still the owner. I put the deed back in the envelope. I didn't put it in the drawer. I slid it under my mattress. It wasn't just a document anymore. It was my only card. And I knew, even then, that I was going to have to play it. The routine changed. They stopped asking me if I wanted to eat. Loretta would cook, the family would eat, and whatever was left over, a cold piece of chicken, a few spoonfuls of potatoes, was left on the counter for me. I didn't mind cooking for myself. What hurt was the assumption. The quiet, deliberate push away from the table. Adam and I barely spoke. When he did seek me out, it was for a favor. "Dad, can you give Travis a hand? His motorcycle's acting up." "Dad, the utility bill came. Can you go down to the office and pay it? You know the people there better." "Dad, that door to the shed is stuck again. Go fix it." They were errands, disguised as chores, but I knew what they were. They were tasks for the man who lived there on their good graces, the man who had to help out. I did them. I fixed the door. I paid the bill. I didn't complain. I just watched. I started to observe. Not just watch, but notice. I noticed the electricity bill tripled. So many phones charging, the television on 24 hours a day, the extra space heaters in their rooms. I noticed the pantry, which I had stocked, was empty in 3 days. I noticed that the yard, which I had mowed, was now littered with their bikes and cigarette butts. And no one but me ever swept the porch. One Friday, I took my own small pension check and went to the market. I came back with 2 heavy bags. Rice, beans, oil, flour, the basics. I had barely set them on the kitchen counter when Talia walked in. "Oh, Archer, good. You bought groceries. Now we'll have enough for everyone." She didn't thank me. She didn't offer me a glass of water after the walk. She just started putting my groceries into her mother's pantry. For everyone. The words echoed in my head. I felt the anger, a hot, sharp pressure behind my eyes, but I swallowed it. Rage, when you let it loose, just burns you up. They would use it. They would point and say, "See? He's just a grumpy old man. He doesn't want to share." I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I went to my porch chair. I sat. I watched the cars go by. I thought about how to stay, but on my own terms. My new plan was simple: endure, observe, and wait. I remembered when Adam was a boy. I remembered building him a wooden car from scrap lumber because I couldn't afford a real one. I remembered the day he fell and cut his knee, how he cried and wouldn't let anyone but me clean the wound. I wondered when that boy had started seeing me as an obstacle instead of his father. I was not going to be pushed out of my own life. Patience, when you mix it with memory, becomes a weapon. One Sunday morning, I got up at my usual 5 a.m. The house was dead quiet. I went to the kitchen. I pulled out the bacon I'd bought and hidden in the back of the fridge. I made eggs, toast, and a full pot of fresh, hot coffee. I set a single place at the dining room table. My place, with a clean napkin and silverware. I sat and ate a hot, quiet breakfast. It was the best meal I'd had in weeks. I was washing my plate and pan when Talia and Loretta came shuffling into the kitchen, yawning. Talia looked at the empty stove, then at my clean plate in the drying rack. "Oh," she said, her voice heavy with disapproval. "You didn't make enough for everyone?" I turned from the sink, drying my hands. I looked her straight in the eye. Today, I cooked for myself. Everyone else knows how to start their own day. The kitchen fell silent. Loretta scoffed and opened the fridge, muttering something under her breath. But I didn't care. That small act gave me something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. It was a boundary, and it made them uncomfortable. I started doing other things. I washed my own clothes and linens separately. I bought a small, insulated bag and kept my own food, my coffee, my bread, my fruit, in my bedroom. And I went to the hardware store and bought a new lock set. I spent an hour installing a deadbolt on my bedroom door. When Talia saw it, her eyes narrowed. "Why are you locking your door, Archer?" "To make sure my space stays my space," I said, testing the key. It worked perfectly. It wasn't about isolating myself. It was about making it clear that there were parts of me and parts of this house that did not belong to them. One Thursday afternoon, I went to do my laundry. Travis, Talia's brother, had his motorcycle parked in the small utility hallway, completely blocking the path to the washer and dryer. He was sitting on the porch, cleaning another part with a greasy rag. "Travis," I said, "I need to get by. Move your bike." He didn't look up. "I'll get to it in a minute. I'm busy." I waited a full minute. He kept rubbing the chrome part. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I went to my room, got the set of universal keys I'd kept from my construction days, and went back to the bike. I found the one that fit, put it in the ignition, clicked it into neutral, and wheeled the heavy machine out the back door, down the path, and onto the sidewalk by the street. I went back inside and started my laundry. 10 minutes later, Travis came storming into the hallway. "Did you touch my bike?" he yelled. "You got no right to touch my bike." I looked him in the eye. "And you have no right to block my path in my house." Travis didn't just let it go. He went straight to Talia. That night, Adam came to my room. He knocked, but didn't wait for an answer, just pushed the door open. My locked door. I must have forgotten to throw the deadbolt. "Dad, what's this about you messing with Travis's bike?" I was reading a newspaper. I folded it slowly and placed it on my lap. I moved it. It was blocking the washer. "He's furious," Adam said, pacing the small room. "You can't just go around touching other people's things. You're making things tense." "He blocked my path," I said, my voice as calm as steel. "In my house." "It's our house, Dad," Adam shot back. "It's everyone's house. You need to learn to get along. We're all a family here." "A family respects each other, Adam. They're not doing it, and you're not making them." He pressed his lips together, his face red. "Just stay away from Travis. Just try to keep the peace." He left, shutting the door harder than he needed to. I stared at the wood. I stood up and threw the deadbolt. Peace was the last thing I was going to get. The tension in the house was no longer a quiet hum. It was a visible thing. You could cut it. I felt it every time I walked down the hall. Every time I opened the kitchen door and was met with a wall of hostile silence. It was a Friday afternoon. I was in the yard, sweeping the dry leaves off the patio. Travis was sitting in a plastic chair, staring at his phone. His heavy backpack was thrown on the ground, right in the middle of the path to the gate. I walked over. "Move your bag." He didn't look at me. "I'll move it in a minute." I kept sweeping. I swept the whole patio. 10 minutes later, the bag was still there. I walked over, hooked my foot under the strap, and flicked it hard. The bag skidded across the concrete and hit the side of the shed. Travis shot to his feet. "Hey! What the hell, old man? You have no right to touch my things!" I gripped the broom handle. I looked him dead in the eye. "And you have no right to leave your things in other people's way. Learn that." The words weren't loud, but they were heavy. He huffed, grabbed his bag, and stormed into the house. A few minutes later, I heard him in the kitchen, his voice loud, complaining to his mother and Talia that I was in a bad mood and starting fights. That night, when Adam got home, Talia met him at the door. I didn't hear it all, but I heard my name. I heard the word respect. I heard the word problem. He came to my room. This time he knocked, and the deadbolt was thrown. "Dad, open the door. We need to talk." I opened it. He looked tired and angry. "Dad, what is going on? Talia tells me you're fighting with everyone now. You threw Travis's bag?" I stood in the doorway. "I'm not fighting with anyone, son. I'm just asking for respect. That's all. I'm asking for people to not block my path in the house I paid for." "You're making this impossible," he said, his voice rising. "Show they have a problem with you, and that's a problem for me and Talia. If your people have a problem with me asking for basic respect," I said, "then that's not my problem." That last part hit him. He stood there in silence, his jaw working. Then he said, "Just remember, this house is for everyone. If you want to stay, we all have to be at peace." I almost smiled. Peace begins when one person respects the other, Adam. You remember that too. He didn't have an answer. He just turned and walked away. Over the next few days, the small, petty attacks started. They were changing things, trying to make me uncomfortable. The old wooden chair where I always sat on the porch vanished. I found it 2 days later in Tyler's room, covered in his dirty clothes. My coffee mug, the one I'd brought from my old house, disappeared from the drying rack. I found it in the yard, under a bush, half full of rainwater and dirt. The small space in the pantry where I kept my locked food bag was suddenly filled with their things, cans of beer, bags of chips, blocking my access. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a campaign. I didn't respond with shouts. I responded with action. I rescued my chair, cleaned it, and chained it to the porch railing with an old bike lock. I washed my mug and kept it in my room. And I went to the pantry, took all their items out, and piled them on the kitchen floor. Then I put my bag back. I had to get out. The air in the house was poison. I walked downtown to Mrs. Miller's diner. She'd known me for 30 years. "Archer, where have you been hiding?" she called out, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter before I even sat down. "Just busy, Martha," I said. She served me a bowl of beef stew and a cold soda. "You look tired, Archer." "Just getting older," I said. We talked for an hour. About the town, about her grandkids, about the old construction days. It felt good to be heard. It felt good to be seen as a person, not a piece of furniture. I left there feeling a little stronger. When I returned late in the afternoon, the atmosphere in the house was arctic. Loretta, Talia's mother, was waiting for me in the kitchen. "Arthur, we need to talk," she said. She didn't use my name often. I sat at the table. I already knew where this was going. "We've just noticed you've been very distant," she said, trying to sound reasonable, as if you don't want to share with the family. And well, we all have to cooperate here. We all have to help with what's needed. I took a deep breath. "Loretta, cooperating is not the same as obeying orders. Helping is not the same as doing all the work you don't want to do. And sharing doesn't mean my things can be used without respect and then thrown in the yard." An uncomfortable silence fell. Talia's aunt, who had been listening from the dining room, muttered just loud enough for me to hear. "Well, if he doesn't like it, he can leave." That was it. That was the line. The anger I had been swallowing for weeks suddenly rose up. It wasn't hot and messy. It was cold and sharp. I stood up slowly from the kitchen table. I looked at Loretta. I looked at the aunt in the dining room. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the room. "I bought this house. I paid for it in cash. My cash. And as long as my name is on that deed, I am staying here." I pointed to the front door. Anyone who doesn't agree with that knows where the door is. I walked out of the kitchen. I didn't slam any doors. I went to my room, shut the door, and threw the deadbolt. I could hear them whispering furiously behind me. They thought I was cornered. They thought all I had was quiet endurance. They didn't know what I was capable of. The next Sunday, the tension exploded. I was in the yard, watering the few tomato plants I'd been trying to save from their neglect. The house was loud. Music was blaring from one of the bedrooms. I heard a strange noise from my own room, a scraping sound, like furniture being moved. I dropped the hose. I walked inside, down the hall, and pushed my door. It was unlocked. I'd forgotten to lock it when I went to the yard. I found Travis and his cousin Tyler, inside my room. My room. They had my wardrobe, the heavy oak one that had been my father's, pulled away from the wall. They were trying to shove a large plastic storage tub into the space behind it. "What are you doing in here?" My voice didn't sound like my own. It was a low growl. Tyler, the younger one, shrugged. "Nothing. Just storing some things in here. You got all this space." "Get out," I said. "We're just moving this," Travis said, shoving the wardrobe again. Calm down, old man." I walked over, grabbed the handle of the wardrobe door, and slammed it shut with all my strength. The sound was like a gunshot. "Nothing that isn't mine gets stored in here. Get out. Now." They looked at each other. Tyler muttered, "Crazy old man." I didn't hold back. "Not crazy, the owner. And if you ever come into my room again without my permission, I will not be responsible for what happens." I physically herded them out the door, shoving Travis in the back when he moved too slowly. I slammed the door behind them and threw the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from pure rage. I stood in the middle of my violated room, my heart hammering. They hadn't just invaded my space. They had touched my things. That night, I slept badly. I kept hearing footsteps in the hall, whispers. I didn't know if it was real or imagined. Before dawn, I sat up in bed. Something was wrong. The wardrobe. Why were they so interested in the wardrobe? My toolbox was in there, my personal papers. I got out of bed, my hands suddenly cold. I knelt and reached under the mattress. The manila envelope was gone. I pulled the mattress completely off the box spring. Nothing. I tore the sheets off. Nothing. I went to my nightstand. I emptied the drawers. My blood ran cold. The envelope with the deed, my only proof, my leverage, it was gone. Their invasion wasn't about storing a plastic tub. It was a theft. They had been looking for it. They had found it. I sat on the floor of my room as the sun came up. The game was over. They had just made their move, and they had taken my queen. I was no longer just observing. I was at war. My advantage was gone, stolen. I had nothing in my hands. I didn't shower. I got dressed, unlocked my door, and walked straight out of the house. No one was awake. I walked the 2 miles to Marcus's auto shop. He was an old friend, another man who had worked with his hands his whole life. He was opening up, raising the big bay door. "Archer, you're out early," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "I need coffee, Marcus," I said. He poured me a cup of thick black coffee from his thermos. I told him everything. The move, the in-laws, the disrespect, the invasion of my room. And now they stole the deed, Marcus. They took it. Marcus listened, his face hardening. He spat on the concrete floor. "So they're not just disrespectful, they're thieves." He looked at me. "You've been patient, Archer. I get it. You didn't want to fight your own son." "He's not the same man," I said. "No, he's not," Marcus agreed. "So stop treating him like he is. Your patience is done. They think you're a weak old man they can rob. It's time to remind them who you are. It's time to stop observing and start acting." His words were like a steel rod in my back. "What do I do?" "They have the paper." "The paper is just a copy," Marcus said. "The truth is at the courthouse. Go. Now." I didn't go to the courthouse. Not first. I went to the office of Mr. Garrett, the lawyer who had handled the sale of my old house and the purchase of this one. He was an old-school man, all files and leather-bound books. Mr. Garrett, I said, sitting across from his heavy oak desk, I have a situation. Archer, good to see you, though you look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I've been robbed. I laid it all out. The occupation, the disrespect, and finally, the theft of the original deed from my room. Mr. Garrett steepled his fingers. He didn't look surprised. I've seen this before, Archer. Not from family, usually, but the pattern is familiar. They are trying to establish a claim. They think possession of the deed gives them power. Does it? Not legally, Mr. Garrett said, but it complicates things. It suggests they are planning a legal challenge, forgery, a claim of a verbal agreement. We must act before they do. What do we do? First, we make your stolen deed irrelevant. I'll file a report of the theft, which invalidates that document for any transfer. Second, we get you a new, certified copy of your property record from the county. That is your legal proof. Third, he paused, looking at me over his glasses. You must decide what the end goal is. Do you want to scare them, or do you want them out? I thought of Travis and Tyler in my room. I thought of Loretta's smug voice. I thought of Adam's cold eyes. I want them out, I said. Mr. Garrett nodded, a grim smile on his face. He pulled a fresh legal pad from his drawer. Then here is the plan. I left his office an hour later, my head clear and a list of instructions in my pocket. My next stop was to see my friend Elias. Elias had worked in the county recorder's office for 30 years before he retired, and he still knew everyone there. He spent his mornings drinking coffee at the diner across from the courthouse. I found him there. Elias, I need a favor. Archer, you look like you're on a mission. I am. I need paperwork from the recorder's office, and I need it fast-tracked, today, and I need it done quietly. I explained the situation. Elias nodded slowly. Theft of a deed. That's ugly. That's not just disrespect. That's a crime. He stubbed out his cigarette. Finish your coffee. Let's go for a walk. We walked across the street to the county office. Elias bypassed the main line and knocked on a side door. A clerk looked up, saw him, and smiled. Elias, what brings you here? Got an old friend in a bad spot, Sarah. He needs a certified property record. Today. Can you help us? I gave her my name and the address. She typed for a few minutes. Yep. Archer Prescott. Sole owner. Clean title. I need that on paper. Certified and stamped, I said. It'll cost you $20 and take about an hour, she said. I've got the 20, I said. Elias clapped me on the shoulder. Go wait in the lobby, Archer. I'll stay here and make sure it gets the right stamp. An hour later, I walked out of that building with a fresh, official, legally binding document that proved I was the owner. The paper in my hand made their stolen deed worthless. I walked home. I felt different. I wasn't the old man retreating to the porch. I was a man with a plan. I put the new, certified document in a fresh manila envelope. I didn't put it under the mattress. I went to the shed, opened my old heavy-duty construction toolbox, and slipped the envelope into a hidden compartment in the lid. I locked the box. I went back to the house. The atmosphere was the same. Loud. Messy. I walked into my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed. They thought they had me. They thought they had won. They didn't know I had just replaced my queen. And now, I was coming for their king. The next afternoon, I went to the yard to sweep. The disrespect had escalated. Now that they thought they had the deed, their confidence was sky high. Travis was sitting on the porch steps, right in the way, smoking. He saw me coming with the broom and deliberately blew a cloud of smoke in my face. "This is everyone's yard now, Archer," he sneered. "Maybe you should find somewhere else to sweep." I stood still for a second. I looked at the lit cigarette in his hand. I didn't say a word. I grabbed his wrist. He was younger, but I was a foreman for 30 years. My grip is like a vice. He yelped in surprise. I uncurled his fingers, took the cigarette from his hand, and pressed the lit end firmly against the brick wall of the house, extinguishing it. "This yard is still mine," I said, my voice low and hard. "And as long as I'm here, my rules are respected. No smoking on my porch." I let go of his wrist. He scrambled to his feet, rubbing his arm, his face a mask of shock and anger. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He turned and stormed into the house, slamming the screen door behind him. I went back to sweeping. That night was dinner. I knew it would be a test. I walked into the dining room. Loretta had set the table. Plates and silverware for Adam, for Talia, for her husband, Travis, Tyler, the aunt. There was no place set for me. It wasn't an oversight, it was a statement. They had the deed. I was no longer even a guest. I was invisible. They all sat down. Adam, my son. He saw there was no plate for me. He looked away and unfolded his napkin. I stood there for a moment, observing the scene. Then I turned, went into the kitchen, and took my own plate and silverware from the drying rack. I walked back to the dining room. I walked to the head of the table, my spot, which was empty, and set my plate down. I went back to the kitchen, took the pot of stew off the stove, and served myself a full portion. I sat down at the head of the table. No one spoke. The only sound was my spoon hitting the bowl. The silence was heavy, thick, and full of hate. I looked up and met Loretta's eyes. She looked furious. I took another bite of stew. It tasted like victory. My open defiance, the cigarette, the dinner table, panicked them. They thought I should be defeated. Why was I acting like I was still in charge? 2 days later, Talia and Loretta approached me on the porch. Their attitude was completely different. They were smiling. It was terrifying. "Archer," Talia said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We feel terrible. Things have been so tense." "We're all family here," Loretta added, putting a hand on my arm. I wanted to shake it off. "We want to make it right. Let me cook you a special dinner tonight, just for you, to say we're sorry." I knew it was a trap, but I needed to see the trap. "That's nice of you," I said. That night, they served me a plate of food before anyone else. They sat with me. Adam was there, looking relieved that everyone was getting along. "We just want to make this official," Talia said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "It's just a utility form. With so many of us here, my dad wants to get the electric bill put in his name to help out. But since you're the original owner, it needs your signature." She handed me the paper and a pen. "Just sign at the bottom." I unfolded the paper. It wasn't a utility form. My eyes were old, but I could read. I saw the words quitclaim and transfer of title. They were trying to trick me into signing the house over to them. They were using the stolen deed as a distraction, while this was the real attack. This was the false lead. I stared at the paper. Then I looked up at Talia, at Loretta, at my son, Adam, who was just nodding along, oblivious or complicit. I slowly folded the paper back up. I pushed it across the table. "No," I said. Talia's smile froze. "What? Archer, it's just a form." I said, "No, I'm not signing anything." I stood up from the table. And my answer is final. I walked away, leaving the utility form on the table. The fury I felt was cold and absolute. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had tried to trick me like a child. They had just confirmed my next and final move. The fake truce was the last straw. The next morning, I was at Mr. Garrett's office before he'd even finished his first coffee. "They tried to make me sign a quitclaim," I said, placing the fraudulent paper on his desk. "They disguised it as a utility bill." Mr. Garrett looked at the paper and his face darkened. "This is conspiracy to commit fraud, Archer. This is a criminal act." "It's the proof I needed," I said. "Are the other papers ready?" "They are." He opened a drawer and pulled out a thick, official-looking packet. The eviction notices, legally binding, filed with the court, and backed by your certified title. I signed where he told me to sign. I paid his fee, in cash. "A process server will deliver these tomorrow," he said. "No," I said. "I'll deliver them myself." I took the packet. My next stop was the bank. I walked to the teller and withdrew a large sum of money. Not all of it, but a significant amount. I put the cash in an envelope in my inside jacket pocket. I was no longer just defending. I was attacking. My last stop was Mr. Russo's hardware store. Mr. Russo and I had been in the same union local for 40 years. "Archer, what can I do for you?" "I need boxes, Russo. Large ones. Heavy duty." "How many?" "A dozen, to start." He smiled, leaning on the counter. "Moving, Archer?" "Something like that," I said. "Can you have your boy deliver them? This afternoon?" "You got it. To the new house?" "That's the one, Cain," I said. I paid him in cash and walked home. I was ready. When the delivery truck from Russo's dropped off a dozen large, flat-packed moving boxes on the front lawn, the house went into a panic. I was on the porch when Talia stormed out. "What is this? What are these boxes for?" "What do they look like?" I said, cutting the plastic binding with my pocket knife. She ran back inside. I could hear her yelling, "He bought moving boxes! He's doing something!" A few minutes later, the entire family was gathered in the living room. They weren't asking. They were staging an intervention. I walked in, holding one of the eviction notices. "Dad," Adam said, his voice pleading, "what are you doing? You're scaring everyone." "Sit down, Adam," I said. I sat in my armchair, the one Talia's father had vacated. He was standing by the wall, looking nervous. "We need to talk," Talia said, taking charge. "We just think this isn't working." "I agree," I said. She was taken aback. "Oh, good. Well, we've been talking, and it's just not comfortable for everyone to live like this anymore. There are too many of us. It's too much tension." She took a deep breath. "We think it would be best if you found a place to be more peaceful. A small apartment. Maybe a retirement community. Something more manageable for you." I looked at her. At her mother, Loretta, who was nodding eagerly. At Travis, who was smirking. At my son, who was staring at the floor. They were kicking me out. After all this. They were finally just saying it. "I see," I said. "So you want me to leave the house that I bought?" "It's not that, Dad," Adam stammered. "It's just for the best. For everyone." "Don't worry, son," I said. "I agree. It is time for a change." I stood up. I went to the shed, unlocked my toolbox, and came back with the fresh manila envelope. I walked to the coffee table and opened it. I took out the certified, stamped property record I'd gotten from the courthouse. "You see this?" I said, holding it up. This is the real title to this house. It clearly states who the owner is. Archer Prescott. Me. The deed you stole from my room? I looked at Travis. It's a worthless piece of paper. I reported it stolen. Their faces changed. The smirks vanished. Loretta turned pale. Talia's eyes went wide with rage. You can't. I can, I said. I leaned forward. I decide who lives here. And as of today, this house is not for everyone. It's for whoever I say. And you? I looked at Loretta, at Travis, at Tyler, at the aunt, at the father. You have not respected my rules. Then I looked at Talia. And you tried to defraud me. I took the legal eviction notice from my pocket and threw it on the table. Here is the notice I filed today. It's official. All of you, Talia, Loretta, all of you, have exactly 1 week to get your things and get out of my house. I turned to my son. He was white as a sheet. Dad, don't do this. I didn't start this, Adam. You did. You let this happen. You chose your new family. I tapped the eviction notice. Now they have to leave. Whether you go with them, that's your choice. A heavy, dead silence fell on the room. It was broken by Loretta. You can't do this to us. After all we've done, we're family. You're not my family, I said. You're thieves. Talia grabbed the paper, read it, and her face crumpled in rage. He's bluffing. He wouldn't. Try me, I said. 1 week. If you are not gone by next Friday at noon, I will have the sheriff here to remove you. I turned and walked to my room. I locked the deadbolt. Outside my door, the house exploded. Yelling, crying, doors slamming, accusations. I heard Talia screaming at Adam. I heard Travis punch a wall. I didn't care. I sat on my bed and listened to the sound of their world falling apart. The next few days were a silent war. No one spoke to me. I made my coffee, sat on my porch, and read my paper. I watched them pack. They were furious. They were sloppy. They dragged furniture, scraping the floors I'd paid to have refinished. They threw trash in the yard. Talia's brothers, Travis and Tyler, were the first to go. They loaded their truck, gave me a look of pure hatred, and sped off. Then the aunt and the father. By Friday morning, it was just Adam, Talia, and Loretta. They were loading the last of their things into the U-Haul they'd rented. Adam came to my room. He looked exhausted. His eyes were red. Dad, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't know where we're going to go. I hope you find a place, I said, not unkindly. But you can't stay here. Are you really going to do this? To me? Your son? I looked at him. I gave you a home, Adam. I gave you a chance. You threw it away. You let them disrespect me. You let them steal from me. You let your wife try to defraud me. You made your choice. Decisions have consequences. He had nothing to say to that. He just stared at me, then turned and walked away. Loretta was the last one to the truck. She walked past me on the porch. You'll regret this, old man, she spat. I don't think I will, I said. Adam was the last to leave. He stopped at the gate of the U-Haul, looked back at the house, then at me. I just watched him. He said nothing. He got in the truck and drove away. I stood on the porch and watched the truck turn the corner until it was gone. The street was silent. The house was silent. I walked inside. They had left a mess. Trash on the floor. Stains on the carpet. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt peace. I went to the kitchen and made a fresh pot of coffee. I took my mug, my own mug, and filled it. I went back to the porch and sat in my chair, the one I had chained to the railing. I unhooked the lock and sat down. I took a deep breath of the quiet afternoon air. For the first time in months, this place truly belonged to me. Not just on paper. In reality, the house was empty, but I was finally home. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.